the man who redefined the vice presidency. When Dick Cheney died on November 3rd, 2025, at the age of 84, he left behind not just a lifetime of public service, but a legacy of both power and controversy that will echo through American politics for decades. Once considered a behind-the-scenes operator, Cheney transformed the office of the vice presidency into one of the most consequential roles in modern U.S. government, and in so doing, rewrote expectations about what a vice president could and should do. Yet his legacy is far from unanimous. Praised as a patriot and strategic thinker by some, demonized as a symbol of unchecked executive power and wartime excess by others. The news of his passing has triggered an outpouring of tribute and condemnation in equal measure. Here's a deep dive into the life, actions, controversies, and enduring impact of Dick Cheney. Early life and rise to power. Born January 30th, 1941 in Lincoln, Nebraska, and raised in Casper, Wyoming, Cheney studied political science at the University of Wyoming after a stint at Yale. His career in Washington began early. He worked under President Gerald Ford as White House Chief of Staff, 1975 to 77, served in Congress representing Wyoming, 1979 to 89, and then as Secretary of Defense under President George H. W. Bush, 1989 to 93. As Defense Secretary, he oversaw the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, and adopted a posture of strong U.S. military capability abroad. By the time he became the running mate of George W. Bush in 2000, Cheney had built a reputation as a seasoned insider, comfortable wielding power behind scenes. The vice presidency, 2001 to 2009, and the post-9/11 era. When the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 struck, Cheney found himself at the center of the U.S. response. He worked closely with President Bush, the National Security Team, and the Department of Defense to coordinate the war on terror. He pushed for expansive government powers in the name of security, expanded surveillance, enhanced interrogation programs, and a willingness to act unilaterally in the executive branch. In 2003, the U.S. invasion of Iraq became one of the most consequential decisions of Cheney's vice presidency. He was a key driver of the case that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and was linked to al-Qaeda, claims that later proved unsubstantiated. All the while, Cheney quietly ensured that the vice presidency was not just a deferential role, but a seat of influence, coordination, and strategy. As one historian put it, he was the consummate bureaucratic operator. Key events, scandals, and controversies. The Iraq War and the War on Terror. The decision to invade Iraq remains perhaps the most enduring and controversial part of Cheney's legacy. Critics argue it was based on faulty intelligence and set the stage for years of instability. Supporters argue he acted out of national security urgency, believing the threats were real and pressing. But either way, Iraq defined much of the Bush-Cheney era. 2. Expanding executive power. Cheney's tenure saw the vice presidency taking on roles previously unseen: key policymaking, intelligence coordination, and energy strategy. Many constitutional scholars point to Cheney's era as a turning point in the balance between executive, legislative, and judicial branches. 3. Personal health and public awareness. Cheney's health was a long-running story. 4 heart attacks before 2007, a heart transplant in 2012, and enduring vascular disease. His willingness to remain active despite serious illness added to his image as a resilient figure in U.S. politics. 4. The hunting accident. In 2006, while serving as vice president, Cheney accidentally shot his friend and hunting companion Harry Whittington with birdshot during a quail hunt in Texas, an incident that generated both media scrutiny and meme culture. Post-vice presidency. The Trump era and Republican schism. After leaving office, Cheney did not fade quietly into retirement. Instead, he emerged as a vocal critic of Donald Trump and supported candidates who opposed Trump's populist direction. In 2024, he even endorsed Democrat Kamala Harris over Trump. This put him at odds with many in the Republican Party and reaffirmed his willingness to stand by principles, however unpopular they might be within his own party fold. Reaction, and legacy. Cheney's family announced his death from complications of pneumonia along with cardiac and vascular disease on November 3, 2025. Flags at the White House were flown at half-staff, but the official response, particularly from President Trump, was muted. The White House press secretary stated simply that the president was aware of Cheney's passing. Tributes poured in from across the political spectrum. Former President George W. Bush described Cheney as a decent, honorable man and a patriot statesman. Yet the response was far from universally laudatory. On the contrary, Cheney's critics seized the moment to highlight what they considered his worst excesses: preemptive war, expanded executive power, and controversial interrogation methods. In many ways, Cheney embodies the tensions of the post-9/11 era: security versus liberty, executive power versus oversight, conservative pragmatism versus ideological purity. His life and work will be scrutinized for years to come. Why it matters, and why it still resonates. The vice presidency redefined. Prior to Cheney, many vice presidents were marginal figures. Cheney made the role central to policy, politics, and strategy. That shift affects how future VPs operate. Precedent for executive expansion. Many of the powers claimed or exercised during his tenure remain relevant, from surveillance and detention practices to presidential war powers. Understanding Cheney is understanding how he got here. Partisan fractures visible. Cheney's split with the modern Republican Party prefigured the larger identity crisis the GOP has faced. Are conservatism's roots about national security, free markets, and alliance-based foreign policy, or about populism, isolationism, and revolt against the elite? Global impact. The decisions made under his watch, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, continue to affect the Middle East, U.S. global posture, and the debate over American intervention. Personal profile as a window on power. His health struggles, the hunting accident, the heart transplant. They humanize a figure otherwise associated with hard statecraft and uncompromising decisions. It's a reminder that the most powerful players have vulnerabilities too.